What's up, everybody? How's it going? So I've done a lot of mock Google interviews on this channel. I've done a lot of mock Google coding interviews. I've done a mock Google systems design interview. But one type of interview that I haven't done before is a mock Google behavioral interview. That's right, a behavioral interview. We know the technical interviews, coding, systems design, but we don't know behavioral interviews. Well, in this video, I'm doing a mock Google behavioral interview with Nick White. He's another tech YouTuber. You probably know him if you watch my videos. He's a really cool guy. We also did another video on his channel about coding interview prep habits. I'll put the link to his channel and to that video in the description and in the comments below. So in this video, I did a mock behavioral interview with him. This is a standard type of behavioral interview that you might get at a big tech company or any tech company. I asked him various questions. Most of them were picked from Algo Expert, my company, where we have behavioral interview content. By the way, if you're preparing for your coding interviews or your systems design interviews or your behavioral interviews, then do check out my company, Algo Expert. Go to algoexpert.io and use the promo code CLEM, CLEM, for a discount on the platform. And just before we jump into the interview, I will say that behavioral interviews are kind of weird, kind of tricky, because there's no real right or wrong answer. It's very conversational. As you'll see, it's almost like Nick and I are just talking about him and his life and his experience, except obviously it's kind of in a formal setting. But it's a very interesting kind of interview. Hopefully you'll find this video insightful. And now, enjoy the interview. And by the way, we did a debrief session after the interview, so be sure to stick around for that to see how Nick performed. So Nick has his button-down shirt. He's ready to put his serious hat on. Nick, are you ready for the behavioral interview?
I am. I was born ready.
You were born ready. All right, let's do this. This is probably going to be about 20 to 30 minutes, and let's begin. So, hey Nick, how's it going? I hope that you've had a good couple of interviews so far today. So the way that we're going to do this interview is probably 20 to 30 minutes, just kind of getting to know you a little bit better, having you tell me about your experience, and then we might jump into a short coding problem, if that's okay with you.
That sounds great.
Cool. So I'm looking at your resume here, and I see that you've got a few different, work positions over the past, year or so as a software engineer. And then it also looks like you have a YouTube channel, and you've been a content creator on YouTube doing like algorithmic explanations, coding tutorials and all that. So why don't you take, a minute or two to tell me a little bit about yourself and like all this work experience that you have?
Oh yeah, sure. So I went to college for computer science. I did some internships during college where I did full stack web development. I did a couple internships with mobile development, and then afterwards I got some part-time and full-time positions at things like consultant agencies where I did mobile development, more mobile development, more web development, other things like WordPress, like CMS kind of stuff. And then I had a contract position for an actual software engineering role in San Francisco. My YouTube started picking up at the time, so I decided not to return for a full-time position.
And do like YouTube full-time?
I do YouTube full-time at the moment. But
Gotcha. So it sounds like you've had a lot of experience with different parts of the stack, like web development, mobile. On YouTube, it sounds like you're focusing more on algorithms, like coding interviews. What kind of coding tutorials do you do?
I do coding interview tutorials, technical interview prep stuff, and I've done a little bit of web stuff, some project building, stuff like that.
Okay. And so I'm curious, like, how would you compare your experience on YouTube as a content creator in tech to your job or your various jobs as a full-time engineer? Like, have you found some similarities there or what?
There's some similarities as far as project building. When I build projects, that's somewhat similar. That's software engineering, just like it would be in industry. However, I'm not sitting here for 8 hours a day coding. I have nobody telling me what to code. So I'm kind of making stuff up on my own that I think people would find interesting, and not given tasks to do each day by some kind of engineering manager.
Right, right. And so I guess sorry, excuse me 1 second. My cat, this is what happens when you are in doing remote work. My cat is bothering me. I apologize about that, for that, Nick. So I guess one question that I'm very curious about, because these days you see a lot of people doing content creation on YouTube in the tech community and all that. If you were to join Google now and you were to have a full-time software engineering position at Google, do you feel like your YouTube experience would bring something unique to the table? And if yes, like what is that? How do you feel like your experience from YouTube translates into a job at Google?
I think that content creation and being a content creator helps you grow socially. I think that I've grown a lot socially and as a leader in the past 2 years that I've run my channel, from sitting in my bedroom all by myself. Now I'm talking to a lot of people every day. And I feel like I have a lot better communication skills, which some people might lack.
I see. Do you mind expanding a little bit on that? Like, what do you mean by a leader? Like, how has YouTube helped you become more of a leader?
I'd like to think that what I do is kind of direct people's way of thinking, or the people that watch me a little bit, in the right direction. And I want to be doing that in the right direction. I want to, which is what leaders do, is they would direct who they're leading in the right direction, I guess. Does that kind of make sense?
Sure, but I guess do you have a particular example of how you've seen that enact? I guess obviously if you're doing videos and if they're well received, I'm sure you're seeing that kind of impact, but do you have examples maybe that you could share of exact times when you've seen maybe your viewers tell you something or you've helped them? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So I forgot that you don't know me. I teach my audience how to get into companies, how to study for the interviews, so how to prepare. And people that follow the things I say, I kind of tell them how I would study to become proficient in this stuff, and they will follow along. And I've gotten many messages of people that get into these companies, and they thank me because I was a big part in them getting into them.
Right. Okay. That's really cool. And I'm sure that must feel pretty meaningful work if you're helping these people that you don't necessarily know firsthand, right?
Yeah. Very meaningful.
I guess one question that I'm curious about is, have you ever had criticism on YouTube? People who criticize either your work or your approach to your work or things like that? And how have you handled it?
So I post I very rarely get criticism. I have a couple of solution videos that people don't like. And maybe I should take those down. I just never did. But most of the time, I very rarely get criticism. When someone's being negative, for example, I post songs, maybe joking around songs once in a while about coding on my YouTube, or I try and do fun things once in a while. The people that are there for pure educational content might get mad, and they say stuff like, "This channel used to be useful." And I don't need that negative energy. So there's a very simple solution. There's this little 3 dots, and you click delete on the comment, and that's about the end of it.
But so tying this back to a full-time job as part of a software engineering team, how do you think you would react or handle if you had criticism from a teammate, maybe even a close teammate, and you can't just delete them, or hide them or anything?
Well, yeah, okay. So if I actually get criticism that I think is accurate, for example, those solution videos that, there's 2 out of a bunch, hundreds, maybe a couple of them that maybe I didn't do the best job. I probably should have gone back and privated those, because maybe they're just wasting people's time. And I probably will after this. I just forgot about it until now. I think if someone's giving me criticism and I feel like it's true, which I feel like a pretty good judge of what would be true as far as criticism, then I'll take that into consideration. If I agree with it, then I'll try and work on changing that something about myself, whatever that might be.
I see. And so, like, how do you think of the best way to give and receive criticism? Like, are you the kind of person who thinks that criticism, like, should be given frequently? In what way? Like, should it be given directly? Should it be given through a manager or something?
It's kind of difficult because I feel like people's tolerance for criticism is a lot different. Some people would like more of an approach of you being really kind, and they would, be able to take that. And some people need it to be a little bit more serious. Some people would be fine with it being very direct. I just want to know what's going wrong. Tell me, straight up. That's the kind of person I am. I would be glad to just take direct criticism. I won't be affected or have my feelings hurt. But for the general population of people, if I were to give criticism, I would probably have to start off being a little bit more kind, bringing it up, bringing some concern up, whether it be in a joking kind of way, just to let them know that you think that, or some kind of way like that. And then if they don't take that into consideration or something gets worse, then you would have to maybe be more serious about it.
And define, like, be more serious about it. Like, imagine you had this on the job,
Yeah, if it was like something that's really affecting grow, I don't know what the exact scenario would be. Something that's really affecting the productivity of a product, team, development, whatever it is. You could bring up that they didn't, at first you could be nice and bring up that they didn't meet expectations, a certain time. And, maybe just like hope that it doesn't happen again. Say it in a way that makes it seem like, oh yeah, like hopefully this doesn't happen again. And then, if it proceeds, maybe you have to like sit down one-on-one and be like, hey, we're, having a tough time here for these reasons. What do you think is going on here, and how do you think we can make this not happen in the future or improve what's going on here?
Right. Gotcha. And I guess, like, maybe going back to the thing about YouTube and all your experience there, I'm curious, what's been the most challenging thing about YouTube? What's been the most challenging thing about running this channel and growing it?
The most challenging thing for me is probably the filming aspect of it. It seems like you really need to be in the right mind state to film. You need to have things like, I think background matters. I think filming, the camera quality, the audio, like everything kind of comes together into this one thing to be as good as it could possibly be. So just there's a lot of factors. The idea, like some ideas are bad. Just like a lot of things go into filming that have to like all come together and be in place for a video to be good. So it's hard to make good videos.
Right. So it's like that consistent quality aspect of it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so I guess maybe let's change gears a little bit, and why don't you tell me, like, why are you interested in getting a software engineering job now? Because from what I understand, you said that you were potentially offered a position, or you could have pursued another company, but you decided to pursue YouTube full time. And it seems like your YouTube gig is growing like really well. So why are you now looking to get a software engineering job? What are you looking to learn from it? What are your reasons?
I think there's nothing like being in the industry and working a software engineering job where you're coding all day, every day. It's a lot different than YouTube. For example, at one point in time, I was up with the latest technologies, and I knew what the new things coming out and stuff like that because you're paying attention. Everything's going fast. When you're doing YouTube, you don't necessarily have to be paying attention to all these new technologies. You're not coding all day, so you don't need. I don't know the brand new library that came out because I'm not doing anything related to that library.
Right.
So I want to get back to where all the new stuff is because I like the feeling of knowing all the newest stuff and being at the head of all the new technologies. I just like that kind of stuff. But at the same time, YouTube isn't the most stable job. So at the same time, software engineering position, I like coding, and software engineering position is more stable, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I guess, like, how do you think about staying in the loop with all of, like, these new technologies and all that? Like, say you join Google and you have a full-time software engineering job. Like, are you the kind of person who does then try to stay up to date with all the new technologies, or like do you try to stay up to date with just the ones that you work at or that you use at work, or how do you like think about that?
When I'm coding a lot and doing. First of all, I would probably want to be assigned to a project or some kind of team that's working on something with the newest technologies, like the latest and greatest stuff. I would not really be interested in working in a position where I'm, doing like PHP, MySQL, some like old legacy software. So once you start out there, usually the team, if you're all doing the latest stuff, your teammates are going to be, finding new stuff and talking about it. And then, whether how you communicate about it, you learn stuff from them and they learn stuff from you. Usually stuff just pops up like new libraries. And since you're coding all day, you'll just see new things being used all the time. But I like it because I get really interested in the newest stuff because a lot of the time, why are they making it? Because it's probably the best when they release the new thing is usually going to be the best. Otherwise, They're making it for no reason.
Right. And so on that note, like when you started your positions where, for example, you worked in mobile development, from what I understood, you didn't have mobile development experience at that time, did you?
No, I made a iOS app in college, but that was about it.
But so then how did you kind of ramp up? How did you get up to speed in mobile development coming from like maybe only iOS or only one iOS stint, given that on that job you did also Android development, right?
Yeah. So some people read books and articles and stuff like that. I watch videos. I used to read books a lot and stuff, and like reading's fine, but the best way for me to retain information is I watch videos. I watch project building videos for iOS and Android. Let's Build That App is like some dude that is really good at building apps, and I'll just follow along with his little tutorials. I'll build some apps and just pick it up. You kind of just pick it up. It's really similar to web. It's just, you're using different environments and it's like a little bit different, like constraints of the phones and stuff like that. But besides that, just project building, watch videos, and then build projects. Building projects is like a good way to learn stuff too.
Gotcha. So you like if you're assigned something that you don't know, you're gonna get like deep into it using like tutorials and video tutorials, try to build your own projects.
Yeah.
And how do you like what do you do if you're stuck? Like let's say you're at work and you've got like this new thing that you're trying to pick up and you're like completely stuck.
Usually you can find with enough Googling. Usually I'll only get stuck on like, a 3-line thing or like a very specific detail that I need to figure out, like, why is this data not, how do I get this here? Something like that. So usually with enough Googling, you'll find the right way to do it, whether, Stack Overflow or wherever you do. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it'll just be people complaining and then you can't find answers to it. In that case, you just kind of, if you spend enough time and you really work hard, you can kind of, I guess, come up with your own thing once in a while. If you piece enough things together, it could take a really long time and you might have to like struggle through it. One thing you can do to maybe avoid that time gap is ask some of your teammates first is like, hey, do you know anything about this? And if they don't, then I guess, you are going to have to struggle through it, but you could ask people or just like look around.
Right. And then like you can maybe like find the person who does. If they don't know, they can point you to someone or something like that. Okay. Well, listen, just in the last like couple of minutes, I want to ask you a question that I like to ask people just because I always think that like it can be interesting introspection. If you had to say like one thing about yourself that you think you're not particularly good at and that you want to get better at, like something that you've either always been not particularly good at, or maybe like lately you're not particularly good at it? What is it? How do you intend on becoming better at it?
Let me think. If one thing I'm bad at, all right, sorry. I failed the interview. All right.
Take your time.
Yeah, I just need to think about it for a second. I guess one thing that has been a little bit tough for me is I like to joke around. Maybe, and I assume that everyone else does, and maybe not everyone else does. Maybe some people are more serious and they don't understand jokes. So I think what I need to better do is identify whether someone is interested in joking around or does want to just have a strictly professional relationship. And I guess that would be like one of the main things, I guess. Or, yeah, something like that, I guess. Is that a good answer?
There are no good or bad answers, but
Okay.
just I'm curious, like, how do you plan on like getting better at that?
I don't know. See, the thing is, I wouldn't want to really work in a position where everyone is dead serious all the time. I would want to probably meet my team and think there's a good fit before I decided to work with them permanently. I would not really have a good time working with all serious people. So that's one of the things I've noticed recently, where as before, when I was first getting my first things, like, oh, it's a job, I get the job. But there's more to consider, like, do you get along with the people? But then you want to make not everyone can be exactly like you. So I need to work on, I guess, accepting that more and figuring out, like, the balance between all of that. Life's all about balance. I don't know what I can do to really improve my balance with everything, but I'm trying, whatever that may be. I'm trying. So I don't know the exact steps, but I am trying to do that.
Sure. Have you had like a time when you was there a specific instance where that happened and you were like, you felt like you said something that like someone didn't really get or something and it just didn't work out? Or
no, I think it's just about like relationships with people. I just like positive energy. I like joking around, and when someone doesn't reciprocate when I'm doing that, then it can be awkward, I guess. So it's like, you're trying to be like all funny or whatever, and then the person is just like, leave me alone or whatever, and then it could be awkward after that. Just not like anything was said, but like passive aggression or something like that. I want to avoid passive aggression at all costs. It's one of my least favorite things.
right. And so just out of curiosity, in a case like that, how would you handle it? Like, let's say that happens, how would you get over like that passive aggressiveness or the weird awkwardness?
So one thing I've learned is you could address it, I guess, which you could say, hey, I was joking. I know, like, maybe you don't want to joke. I think that would just make it worse, though. So I would not even want to address it if it's something like as small as like, I'm trying to joke around and they just want to be serious and maybe it was awkward for a second. I think the best way that I think of now is just let it go and just don't joke around. Identify it early on, and just don't do it again and just forget about it and everything will be fine. Now, if you just keep doing it or if you bring it up, it might just make it more awkward. I think that's probably the best way is just don't get it out of your mind as fast as possible.
Okay, cool. Well, Nick, listen, it's been like about 25 minutes. We've got about 15 more minutes to do a coding interview problem, so let's reverse a linked list. I'm joking, but...
Oh, dude, I've got that. I could write that off the top of my head in like 3 seconds.
But no, okay. All right, I think we're done. If you want, we can do like a quick debriefing session now.
Yeah.
You're actually reversing a linked list in Hangouts chat. All right, so super quick debriefing session. So first of all, like behavioral interviews are always tricky. Like they're not the easiest thing to do as the interviewer, because as the interviewer, you're not looking, like I'm not really looking for a right or wrong answer. I'm not necessarily looking for an answer that pleases me, or like I'm not trying to be like, is Nick like me? Does he think like me? Right? I'm just trying to see like, am I getting bad signal from you? Or are you like unable to give me any signal? Are you unable to give me any good information?
Sure.
And also, like, you have an interesting background, like especially since we focused a lot on your YouTube. It's kind of unique, and I think that you talked pretty well about your YouTube, and you tied it into software engineering pretty well. A couple of things that I'll say, like a couple of points of improvement off the top of my head. So number one, this is like kind of a implementation detail, so to speak. Obviously, I don't know that in a real interview you would have said, I failed the interview. I doubt you would have said that, near the end. But just in general, like, you can take your time. Like, especially if someone asks you a question like I did at the end where I'm like, what's something that you're bad at, right? Or a weakness of yours or something like that, that might take you off guard, right? If it does, just like be like, okay, let me think. Like, let me take a 10, 20 seconds to think about that. It's better that you think about it and come up with something really good than not. So that's one thing. And by the way, here, just as a side note, these are the types of questions that ideally you even just have prepared ahead of time. The classic, like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? All those. Ideally, you have them off the top of your head. So that was one little thing. Then the second thing is there's one point, I forget like the context again. It was like near the middle when we were talking about YouTube and criticism. And this is like a nit. This is not something that I personally I would like flag as bad. But like you said like I've almost never gotten criticism, and like some people might interpret that as like, oh, this guy's a little bit arrogant, or this guy's a little bit like lacks self-awareness or something. Not a big deal, right? I'm just saying things that might catch the eye.
Yeah.
So
I would hope
perhaps
not. I gave a couple examples of criticism though.
You did, and that was great. I'm just saying, like, here I'm being really nitpicky, right? And it's like a lot of it is like it's not,
They might just hear that and then just take that, I guess.
Some people might interpret that and be like, okay, person reacted that they don't get criticism, even though you did say that you got criticism. And then like the last thing I'll say is about the weakness. What you said about the weakness. So it's not that was bad. Like that, again, there's no right or bad answers, right? You just like you kind of entered. You entered one of those like, I don't know, one of those like weird gray areas where like, like it's just I would argue
avoid
that
idea.
You might be able to come up with just a better weakness, so to speak, right? I understand that like you were caught off guard because you didn't expect that question, and like you were truthful, and like personally, I think that was that's a valid weakness, right? Like that's something that like people need to think about in like a professional setting. But it's just like I personally, I would probably just say like maybe try to stay away from that. Try to stay into something more like technical, or it could be also like non-technical, but maybe more like your communication skills. Although like obviously don't make shit up. Like do something.
Yeah,
that
I
you
like my communication skills because I would have said that. So I couldn't think of anything else.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to lie. You don't want to be like, yeah, my communication skills are bad if you're actually a good communicator, which you are. By the way, you're a good communicator, a really good communicator. But yeah, just something to think in mind. And this is where like, on Algo Expert, plug in Algo Expert, when we cover the behavioral interviews, I always say that like, it's not that you can give a right or bad answer for behavioral interviews, but it's just that sometimes you can find examples that give a tiny bit like a better signal, or like, scenarios that give a tiny bit better signal than other scenarios or other answers that you can give. So all that to say, I would just, probably given all the questions that I asked you here, try to like rewatch this video and think like, how could I have answered this just a little bit better to give a little bit more information? And that's what you can do, in your interviews.
Yeah, that makes sense. I totally agree that that's probably a bad topic to bring up. The workplace communication, joking around and stuff like that. Probably I'm gonna think of something else.
You can just like come up with something that will just give better like information and will be like no room for misunderstanding or that type of stuff.
Yeah, I don't want the people to think like, oh, this guy's gonna come into the office and just be saying ridiculous stuff and stuff like that, because that's obviously not what I meant.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like oftentimes it's like that's not really what you meant or whatever. And so quick pause. I just want to add 2 points to this debriefing session. The first one has to do with leadership. We kind of addressed leadership earlier on in the interview. Nick mentioned that he served kind of as a leader on YouTube to his viewers, and I asked him about that. And what I want to say is that his answer, while decent, not bad, it wasn't super detailed. And you might have noticed that I didn't press on that. I didn't ask him more about leadership. I didn't really challenge him on that. And the reason I didn't do that is because I would expect that Nick, if he were applying to Google or Facebook, would be applying for, either an L3 or L4 position, maybe L5. But the point is, he wouldn't be applying for a super senior position. He wouldn't be applying for a management position. And so for an L3 or L4 software engineer at Google, you're not really focusing on leadership or looking for leadership traits. Of course, it matters a little bit, but it's not the main thing. If you are an engineering manager or a very senior candidate, then be aware that you will be asked much more about leadership. If it pops up in the interview, your interviewer will press on it more. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 has to do with something that Nick mentioned when he was talking about working in a legacy code base or with older technologies. He said something along the lines of, I would never want to work in a legacy code base, a code base that uses PHP or MySQL. And here, you usually want to stay away from saying kind of like absolutes, right? Saying I would never want to do that because, well, first of all, it can come across as a little bit entitled, depending on how you say it. Here, I don't think that Nick meant it in a bad way, but it can come across as that. And also, you never know if maybe your interviewer actually likes working in those code bases or types of code bases, types of technologies. Maybe they currently do work with PHP and they really like PHP. They don't, trust me. But in all seriousness, you never know. That could be a thing. And also, you don't know if you might end up working in such a code base or with such a technology once you do get the job. Unless you're applying to a company where it's kind of a thing with them to advertise that they work with the hottest tech and not in legacy code bases, I would recommend staying away from that. At the end of the day, even at Google, there are a lot of legacy code bases. And on this topic of staying away from absolutes, in that final answer that Nick gave, the one that entered the gray area with the jokes, I think he said something along the lines of, I would never want to work on a team that doesn't joke around a little bit or doesn't have kind of a positive attitude. And even there, just in general, I would recommend staying away from absolutes. Nothing super bad or super striking, just probably better to have a more balanced approach to your answers. So those were the couple of points that I wanted to add. And let's go back to the actual video. But yeah, otherwise, good insight, no bad signal. It's always the thing with behavioral interviews, I got good signal. It's not like I was oh my God, this is amazing, but that's not really what you get in a behavioral interview. Yeah. It's more just okay, this person looks like a good software engineer whom I would like as a coworker. I would not dislike them as a coworker. They would not be causing all sorts of weird issues or whatever. And yeah.
Heck yeah. Sounds like I aced it. No.
All right, well, Thank you so much for doing this, Nick. We filmed a video on his channel where we talked about coding interview prep habits, what you want to do, what you don't want to do. Go check it out. Go check Nick out, his channel in general. I'll put the link to his channel and to that video in the description and in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter if you like written format. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter if you like short form written content. Instagram if you like pictures. I just saw that you're like doing all sorts of weird gestures on video. And I'll see you in the next video.
Dude, you kill it on LinkedIn.